when we're happy, we solve problems 20% faster. When we're happy, we attract other happy people, and so people want to be around us. When we're happy, um, we take small risks because we think, well, what if this works out? When we're happy, we have more energy. And so people think, well, what I want to do is I want to make the money and then I'll preoccupy myself with, you know, being happy. But happiness is not some optional extra. Happiness is your foundation. And because of your attitude and your ability to have some perspective, and even when you had little gains and made small amounts of progress, you thought, well, this is better than where I came from. And I'm so blessed to be in this new country with possibilities.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is. British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And there's that big city called Vancouver. Well, we are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers, which puts us in the center of British Columbia. Big province. And so we have living in nature here, lots of trees, lots of lakes. Within 50 miles, we probably have 100 lakes, and lots of friends in nature. We have black bears, grizzly bears, we have caribou, we have deer, we have wolves, we have you name it, we got them all here. So I call it paradise. And for all those people watching us, no, Trump is not going to take Canada and make it a 51st state. Canada will stay Canada. And we love the Americans and all the people that we are dealing with, but Trump, slight problem to us right now. Hopefully in time, common sense will prevail and we can all get back to doing business as usual. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Andrew Matthews, and Andrew is a unique individual. He has written 12 books, and has 12 books actually as 48 different languages in 30 different countries, and is an amazing individual, and he's going to talk about his book, in particular the last one, and it's on our screen, Bouncing Back, and some of the other ones. And those are all, particularly we need is now more than ever, it's about happy days and happy times. Andrew, from Australia, welcome to British Columbia and Prince George, British Columbia, and particularly in the podcast of Brink on the Brink.
Thank you, John. So I am talking to you from far north Queensland in Australia. We have no bears and we have no moose, but I have kangaroos on my front lawn. And
Oh,
I live in that part of the world. I think it's the only part of the world where tropical rainforest meets a tropical reef. And so, and it's tomorrow here.
it
In
is.
Australia, it's 2 a.m. in far north Queensland.
Oh my God! You interrupted your sleep for
It's my
us,
pleasure.
especially.
My-
So,
It's my
Andrew,
pleasure.
tell us about you from all the way Queensland, Australia. Tell us about your background. Were you born in Australia, in Queensland, and particularly in the area, and then about your background and how writing books is not easy. And I'm an author at my late age. I'm working on my fifth and sixth book, and it's not easy. So how did you get into that part, and how did you lead up to going where you are today?
Well, I never wanted to be an author. I never even thought about it, John. I am Australian, a fifth generation Australian, and that is about as far back as most Australians go of my generation. Um, so I had a loving family, and I was blessed. I went to a little school in the country in South Australia. Always thought I would be a lawyer. I think people thought this guy's got a big mouth, and I wasn't very good at mathematics. So people thought you should do law and maybe go into politics. But anyway, my first love was drawing and painting. So I studied classical drawing in New York as a late teenager. And then I made my living drawing and teaching art and painting portraits of judges and corporate presidents. And I, I never intended to do anything else except that when I was 25, I made a shocking discovery. I discovered that the happiest people I knew had bigger problems than me. And that made no sense because I thought that when my life got easier, I would be happier. And yet I saw people around me who were dealing with cancer, people who had lost loved ones way too soon, people who had gone broke. I met a family whose house had burned down, and yet they were the happiest family I ever met. And suddenly I had to admit that it's not what happens to you, but it's how you think about what happens to you. That was a shock. So I was then on a mission to find out how happy people think so I could maybe think more like them. I read about 200 books and I started going to workshops and seminars. And after 3 or 4 years, I managed to make myself a little happier. But I also thought that I'd learned some things that I should have known earlier. And I thought if I didn't know some of these important things about living a more effective life, perhaps I could share them in a book. And so I wrote my first book, Being Happy, and uh, rejected by 17 publishers. But publisher number 18, whose, I think the previous publication was the Vanuatu Telephone Directory. Now, Vanuatu is a tiny little island in the Pacific. Uh, not really the kind of publisher that one would have thought would be able to take a book on being happy global, but they did, and Being Happy eventually sold 3 million copies. And that was the first of 12 books that I've now written in something like 35 years.
So, if you look back, what motivated you is to understand what makes people that have so much adversity, what makes them happy and why are they happy? And I presume, and I agree with you, that's an observation I have made many, many times too, but not to the extent that you do, but it brought it to my attention. The other part that I have found on the other part of the extreme is the people that a lot of people think that what makes you happy if you just had enough money. And so I know a lot of people that are not just multimillionaires, but are billionaires. And most billionaires, and I'm trying to say the benefit or the pleasure. I know quite a few of them, either through their writing or through publications. Most of them that are financially well off, billionaires or near that or approaching that, are not happy. And why is that? It's because there is nothing to dream about anymore. There is nothing to think about anymore because you got it all. Is that the reason?
I think it can be a shock. But if we go back to it can be a shock to realize, okay, this is what I dreamed about, and what now? If we go back to the first part of your question, why is it that some people who have been through extreme challenges are often happier than those people who are less challenged? Uh, I think it's because happiness is in many ways a decision. And sometimes we need to be on our knees before we say, this is the decision I'm going to make. And for those of our listeners who are saying, do you really choose to be happy? We've all seen a toddler, a 2-year-old, playing on the furniture, and he falls on his head. And the first thing he does is he looks around to see who's watching. And based on the audience, he decides whether he'll laugh or cry. And we think that's really cute. But we might not make the connection that we do exactly the same thing. We're out on the freeway and someone cuts in front of us, and we make an instant decision. Is this going to ruin my day, or will I just decide maybe he's having a tough day? So we are choosing. Happiness is something that we choose how we see things. The research on wealth and money shows that to the point where our essentials are taken care of, that we have enough to eat and we have a roof over our heads, we become happier as we have more money to the point of being enough for our most basic needs. But from then on, it really doesn't make much difference whether we've got twice as much money as we need to survive or 100 times as much money. So then it becomes um, what kind of habits do we have that are helping us to be happy on a daily basis? For example, to what extent are we grateful? People say, why does gratitude matter? Well, you can't be grateful and resentful at the same time. You can't be grateful and angry at the same time. And happy people have that habit of saying, what's good about my boyfriend? What's good about this place where I live? What's good about my job, even though it's not perfect? And so happy people do certain things and they have certain habits that we can adopt.
I like it, Andrew. Now, I was born in northeastern Holland in 1940, so I'm 84 years young. And I still remember the war years in Holland when Holland was invaded by the German dictator called Adolf Hitler, who decided in 1938 that he should have a piece of Poland and invaded that and took in all of Poland and then moved further east. And at the same time, putting it into perspective, my parents were married in northeastern Holland when they were young in 1938, and they were in love. And my dad worked for a lumber company and trying to build a career. They had rented this beautiful house and they were in love. It was paradise and they were happy. And so very quickly they had two children, a boy and a girl. And then my mom was pregnant with me in early 1940, and I would be born November the 1st, 1940. And then everything changed. It's because Hitler decided to, with the Blitzkrieg, invade most of Europe, including Holland. And my dad was drafted then, April the 1940, into the Dutch army. And then the last time they saw him was just before Hitler tried to bomb the center of Rotterdam because Holland didn't capitulate quick enough, in his opinion, so he bombed the downtown of Rotterdam and thousands of people died. And so everything then changed. For 5 years, they wouldn't know if he had survived or lived. And so from there on in, it was my mom with two kids and being pregnant with me that were into everything changed. And so very quickly, the first thing that I remember is in 1943, between when the Allied forces had decided to bomb the army infrastructure of Hitler, in particular in northeastern or northwestern Holland, or Germany, right by the North Sea border, and Kiel, Wilhelmshaven, Bremen, Hamburg, all those places. And we were only 10 kilometers away from the border. So my mom would take us out, in particular at nights, because not to see all the planes, the sound of hundreds of bombers, I still know that now. There will never be a sound like it. And the reason she took us out, she felt safer outside than inside. And so in the distance, we see the cities burning. And so the next thing that I remember is 1944, where there was hunger, the hunger year, where Hitler had cut off all the food supply to Holland, and a lot of kids died, and a lot of vulnerable older people died, and so we as kids, the three of us then, every morning we would go with gunny sacks into the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, because they wouldn't shoot us, they would boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And then the winter of 1944-45 was the coldest on record. And still, I remember sitting around that little heater in one little room in the house that we could heat, and to stay warm. It was very hot on the front and freezing cold on the back, and I can still feel that, even today, 80 years later. And then we were liberated on April the 12th, 1945, when the Allied forces, the United States, Canada, and a number of other countries decided to attack Hitler's forces and landed in Normandy and then pushed into Europe for liberation. The Canadians went through Normandy, through France, through Belgium, through the west side of Holland, and pushed out the Germans in northern Holland back into Germany. And I remember that part. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. And we then were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And I knew from that point forward that once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so that was always my dream, to go to Canada, to the land of my heroes. And I was trying to go when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me then. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force. And then finally I won when I was 24 with nothing. A suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I went to Canada. And then the other dream that I had is to build a lumber mill. And the lumber or the timber is in the West Coast in British Columbia. So I arrived here, with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, landed in Vancouver, went to the immigration department, and could speak English, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and fortunately there was a German fellow, I could speak some German, told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, that's where you want to go. 60 years later, I can still see the Greyhound station from here where I landed, and I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, couldn't speak language, didn't have a job, and I counted my money, and I had in my pocket $25.47. But what I had lots of, though, attitude. I've always been positive, even when things were tough in Holland, and even I was not a success story academically. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and became a laborer at 12 and a half years old, but I always stayed positive. Attitude, passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, I work harder, even now still at 84. I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. and I enjoy every day is a good one. And that's the point that I'm making with all that stuff behind me. And then even now some, and I love my wife obviously, and we have also a place in North Saanich here in close to Victoria. So I work during the weekend Prince George, and then go to the weekend to North Saanich. And I'm always, it was all the things that are going on right now, and we talked about it with Trump and the Americans and all the things, all the difficulty and the challenges. And then we become, and a lot of other people too, depressed. And then I say, a lot of times, I say, we live in paradise. Even today, the Canada is paradise. I fly around, I look, I always sit by the window, I look outside, it says paradise. We have a beautiful house in North Saanich, and so many things that we are thankful for, and all the other challenges become secondary. And so that's the issue of choosing to be positive, or maybe I've always been positive, that even at the times that I wondered, why am I different than all the other ones? Because I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7, and became a laborer at 12 and a half years old, but I always stayed positive. I knew I wanted to build a lumber mill when I came to Canada. I did that in a number of other companies, but the key was attitude, passion, work ethic, but will follow is success.
Yeah, yours is such a beautiful story, and I was familiar with it as we began this, and I'm so happy to hear you um, summarize it again. John, I think what we can also learn from your story is that regardless of whether you have an ability to excel at school, there's things about happy people that work in their favor, and the fact is that we are designed to operate as happy people. When we're happy, we solve problems 20% faster. When we're happy, we attract other happy people, and so people want to be around us. When we're happy, um, we take small risks because we think, well, what if this works out? When we're happy, we have more energy. And so people think, well, what I want to do is I want to make the money, and then I'll preoccupy myself with, you know, being happy. But happiness is not some optional extra. Happiness is your foundation. And because of your attitude and your ability to have some perspective, and even when you had little gains and made small amounts of progress, you thought, well, this is better than where I came from. And I'm so blessed to be in this new country with possibilities that, y- you were set up for success because you were happy, you had a vision for where you were going, and we become what we think about. And so, um, in so many ways, you're the perfect example of somebody with a happy attitude and a vision for where they're going.
Isn't that interesting, though, Andrew? That is something that is not common. It is an exception more so than the rule. Because my experience has been, and that's why I always say, my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic. What follows is success. If you're going to interact with me, you're going to be complaining about everything around me, then I will need to stop you and say, not you, but you, hypothetically speaking, is saying, look around the world, look at Eastern Europe right now, the Ukraine and all the things that are happening. Look at the Middle East, look at China, look at Russia, South America. Then how lucky we are, how fortunate we are. But the worst thing that we can do is start off the day being negative, but start it the other way and saying that first and foremost, appreciate how lucky we are, and how can we share some of the things that we are doing with others, in particular young people. Hence, that's where I started writing books and being a presenter as you are, very much an in-demand speaker and presenter, and you have been at all the prominent medias around the world, and then in addition to that, the most powerful media around the world today is podcasting. Because while
Yes.
we are, can you imagine this, Andrew? For not so long ago, there we are sitting here, you and me, developing a friendship and getting to know each other, sharing some of the history, and we already know part of that together. And while at one point I used to interact with people, and I have two couches here. I'd be sitting there, and the guest is sitting here. And then, as we did that in the early stages of podcasting, and you're my podcast number 388 or so of where I'm hosting, and now the 250 where I'm a guest. But that, and it's not about the numbers, but just to put it into perspective, why podcasting is so critically important. There we are now interacting. You from Queensland, Australia, interacting with me from Central British Columbia, talking about these critical things in life of dealing with happiness and being contented. And then at the same time, while we're doing this, we already know that, and again, not bragging about it, but we have something like 770,000 people subscribed on YouTube. This means that we probably have up to 2 million people watching us around the world. How
Yeah. What a
powerful,
blessing.
how
Yes.
powerful, right?
And especially, John, that it opens up this opportunity to everyday people. So you no longer need to have a job in big media to share your message.
And that again is the critical part about it. And it's only on its infancy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
There's something that you said. Go on.
yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
There was something that you said earlier about your own journey, and I talk about that in my book, Bouncing Back. That no one is born extraordinary. We become extraordinary by facing challenges that we didn't choose. Um, and I've being a cartoonist, I like to when I have an important message in my book, I like to share a cartoon, and there is a cartoon early in Bouncing Back where there's a picture of a guy climbing a mountain, and he's exhausted and sweating. He looks like he doesn't want to be there. Even his dog is exhausted. And the caption to the cartoon is, "What you thought was breaking you is probably making you." And that's what we come to understand. And that is, I think, your experience in that those most difficult times are what turned you into somebody extraordinary. And and so most disasters are not total disasters. And the things that we thought, this is terrible, this was never meant to happen. We lose a job, or we get dumped by our fiance, or we break our leg. How often do we look back and say, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have met this lifelong friend. I wouldn't have chosen to go here. I wouldn't be working there. And happy and effective people are able to say earlier rather than later, maybe this is a good thing. And so there's an element of acceptance. If we say, what is the key to happiness and what is the key to a successful life? In many ways, acceptance. Early on, we say, well, I wouldn't have chosen this, but now that I've got it, what am I going to do with it?
Yes, and then the other part, and I agree with you, Andrew, the other part is developing an attitude of I can, not I can't. Because soon as you decide I can't, then that likely will happen. If you decide you can, then virtually anything is possible.
Yeah, I love that point. And one of the things that we notice when we look at achievers, we find Olympic athletes who began as asthmatics. We find billionaires who began as bankrupts. And we find university professors who began their life as migrants who didn't even speak the language. And so, in so many cases, and your own example where you say you failed grade 3 and grade 7, so many times we find people who achieve were not the most likely to succeed. And so, for each of us, if ever we feel that I don't have the natural ability or I don't have the experience, I don't have the natural talent, then that's probably perfect because that's the story of every achiever. And it's not about natural talent. It's about persistence. It's about people who say, okay, yesterday didn't work, then let me see how much better I can do today. And if I may share with our listeners that, most things we do don't work as well as we hope they will. We make a video for YouTube and we think this is going to go viral. And in a month's time, we've had 3 views and 2 were our mother who really liked it. Or we make an ad, we think this is going to help, and it doesn't do anything. Or we go for a job interview and we think this is mine, but we don't get it. Or we go on a blind date and we think maybe this is the one. And halfway through the evening, we're thinking, maybe not.
Yeah.
We write a manuscript and we send it to a publisher. We think they're going to love it, and they don't. So many things that we do will not work as well as we had hoped. But if we do everything as well as we can, then we still gather some momentum. And then one day, usually when we least expect it, something happens that is even better than we imagined.
And that's exactly, precisely what it is. Stay the course, never give up, always believe, and that at some point when you least expect it, success will find you. And that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Now,
Which for those of us, if we're in a job that we think, I don't even want to work here for the rest of my life. We say, well, what do you do if you feel stuck and you're in a job you hate? Well, if it's all you've got, you give everything you have. And while you're giving everything you have in a job that is not ideal, then you're developing your people skills, you're developing your other skills, you're making connections. And one day you will be seen by someone else who says, you're extraordinary, come and work for me. Or you will have the confidence to go and do your own thing. But even if you're going to quit at 4:30 this afternoon, the way to be happy is to do everything you can and be your best until 4:30. And when you leave, you say, I gave it all I had.
yeah,
Happy people do their best, and it's not for their boss, it's because
for
of what
them.
it does for us. Yeah.
But it's unfortunately not as broad as we would hope it is. And I hope you do give inspiration to many because every time I look at over your shoulder at bouncing back, I look at being happy on the other side, and then between are 10 other books, probably with the same message. If I see that book, the first one or the one on the other side bouncing back, I cannot resist to pick it up. I need to see it. And that obviously is the key, correct me if I am wrong, from my experience, is that is the message that most people, even the ones that have not acquired the skill to be happy, that they want to be, and they admire, in a lot of cases, people that are, and are searching for what is the key to how do you become happy, contented, or have what that person shows on bouncing back on the front page and being happy. How do they do it?
Well, we've got to be ready, John. I can remember a time in my life when if someone had said to me, "Come on, snap out of it, be happy," I would just say, "Piss off. I'm not ready. Leave me alone." So sometimes we need to be on our knees, or we need to get to a certain point. I could remember the day in my life, 19th of October, 1983, when I had a look at how I was doing, and I thought, well, romance, not, not really happening. Money in the bank, not much. How much am I enjoying every day and my career? Not really. And I thought, I want to do everything differently from now on because I'm 25 years old and a third of my life may be over. And from that day, I changed how I thought about myself. I was kinder to myself. I decided to be kinder to other people. I decided to grab what opportunities came my way. Did my life change from that day? Not a whole lot, but my direction changed. And if you're in an aeroplane and you change your course by 2 degrees, you land in a different country. And so at whatever point we decide that we're going to be seeing life in a more positive way, embracing challenges, not complaining, giving our best, suddenly our whole trajectory changes, and where we're going to be at 30 or 40 or 70 is totally different.
In some cases, what happens to people that are happy, and I'm one of those, that they attract others that either want to be happy or get inspiration, or other people are perpetually negative. And I avoid those, say, don't come near me because I'm not interested in. That's when I always say, that we live in paradise. And so what can you do even when there are challenges, and there are plenty always, and especially now for everybody. And as we started before we started the program, talking about all the things around the world already that are challenges, especially in North America right now, that should be paradise, and challenges because of circumstances, is saying that even then, maintain the positive attitude and share it. And so for me, as you already noted, is that I'm a very active podcaster, top 1% globally, and have millions of followers, and a lot of them are in the United States. And as they are watching us, saying, no matter what happens, I will stay positive. You are my friends in the United States. I do a lot of business down there, but at the same time, I believe that that you live in paradise, and obviously what is happening right now is not helping anybody. And so I hope at some point they will say, maybe we have to change direction, whatever that is politically or whatever, but it does not stop anybody from being positive. And I will, even under the circumstances, I will always stay positive in saying, when I go back or when I fly or when I drive, I look around. And even now I look around Prince George, we still have a little bit of snow here, and it is paradise. And that will always be my attitude. But I also had a period in life where I still was positive, and obviously I was wondering, who am I? Why am I different? And so when I came to Prince George in 1965, it's my $25.47, and the dream of building a mill, and I was fairly quickly successful, but I didn't feel that even then it did not give me the confidence, and I was wondering, why am I different? And it was not until then that at one point I walked into a store here and I picked up a book. This is the actual book that I picked up, Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Hollowell. And as I don't know why I picked up the book, there was nothing special about it other than I picked it up, I looked at it, and the book, this is the actual book, and I picked it up. I had the date on January 1997. It was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book then in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. It implied that that was a mental deficiency of some sort. And I dated it January 1997. The book was written by Dr. Hollowell, medical doctor, professor, first-class individual, wrote 18 books, 5 on distraction, well-known around the world, and he is ADHD and has dyslexia. So do I. And so that part changed my world. Because the more I found out about it, the more I went through it, the more I looked at Google about ADHD. And it took me 5 years after I read the book and got to know about it. I went to my doc locally here that delivered our 2 daughters and was a personal friend. And he said, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we checked it out, and yes, I do. And then I became aware it's a superpower. And so it gave me the confidence. And now I was 62 years old when I went to my doc and got the diagnosis. And so can you imagine, from the time that I failed grade 7 the 3rd time, I was 12 and a half years old, and they said to my parents, what are you going to do with this guy? And they loved me and cared about me. And some people suggested send him to the mentally challenged school. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to get him a job, and we make him a tradesperson. So, and I liked lumber, and my dad had a friend that had a furniture plant, and say, we'll get him to work in the furniture, and then he becomes a furniture maker. And so that's what I did at 12 and a half years old. And so then going fast forward, then obviously I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years, blah, blah, blah. Still my dream to go to Canada, build my own mill, proving to me that I can do it and start all over again. And then, and then getting diagnosed at 62. So for 50 years, between the time that I was 12 and a half and 62, I discovered ADHD and discovered it's a superpower. That started me to write. And already people had said to me, you have to write a book about your life. That was before they know any of that kind of stuff, because I was successful in business. I had done all kinds. Write a book about it. So now writing books, as we already just said, is not easy, especially not for a guy like me. And so I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started. So I wrote the book. If I about 6 years ago, already in my mid 70s. If I don't do it now, it will never happen. So I called the book "Against All Odds," and so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it, and so and not easy, but that was the first one. Then I wrote another one right after that about ADHD Unlocked, quite successful. And then another one, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And then the last one and another one coming out in June actually. But then I wrote one about I'm 84 years young and I want to stay fit and healthy, and so and I wrote about book about that, living young, dying old, and it's a picture of me actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and so I wrote a book about
Extraordinary.
that. So
You,
all of a sudden it unlocked that in my mind. ADHD changed me. The knowledge.
well, and discovering that it's a superpower, and suddenly you have this extraordinary advantage. So again, it's not so much the situation, but how we see it, and which underlines something that for all of us, it's about having hope, and one idea can change our lives. Um, for example, in bouncing back, I say that it's not failure that crushes us. What hurts most is never having tried.
Exactly.
And so once we get hold of that, once we realize that, hey, when I'm when I'm John's age, I'm not going to worry about the things that I tried that didn't work. I'll be more thinking about the things that I could have done and the places that I could have seen and the internet business that I almost started and the girl in the coffee shop that I should have asked for a date and all of the things that I could have done. So it's not failure that crushes us, but it's not doing what we could have done. So that's one idea, for example, and that can change once you get a hold of that. That can change your entire life. One idea. And similarly for you, the idea that ADHD is not a handicap, but it's a superpower, suddenly it changes everything. And it's a great reason that we stay connected to podcasts and read books because we don't need often a whole lot of ideas to change everything. Sometimes we just need one.
And the other part about it, Andrew, is, and that's why I love having you on my podcast, and especially with your background all the way from Queensland, Australia, you having an effect on other people in the world because you have been on major media, you've been exposed through your books and through presentations that you have done, and now because of the new media that is now coming more and more into prominence and will be as we go forward. It's called podcasting. And podcast will be watched by billions of people globally, and but it is still very much at the beginning. And to be there and being able to share for you and me and others their experience and share it with others, hopefully, and it will inspire others that attitude, passion, work ethic, and making the decision deliberately to appreciate what you have and to be happy. It's a decision that you make, and if you don't, then if you do, it will change your life.
Yeah. And we just do that one day at a time, don't we, John? I mean, I tell a story whereby if you were to gather everything that you need to eat in the next 5 years and everything that you are going to wear in the next 5 years and put that all in a big sack and carried it around on your back. And we say, how would that work? And not very well. You would collapse because you're not designed to carry that kind of load. And similarly, if you were to make a list of everything you need to do in the next 5 years and everything that could go wrong in the next 5 years and carry that all around in your head, how would that work? And similarly, you would probably collapse because you're not designed to carry that kind of load. But you can deal with 24 hours worth of load. And effective people and the happiest people say, let me do my best until bedtime. And I have problems that I'm dealing with, and I don't know how I'm going to sort out what's going on with my kids or my angry ex-wife or my job or whatever the case may be, but let me just deal with today the best I can. And in the end, we live life one day at a time. Like, as you will have found, we write a book 1 page a day, and that's enough. You
Exactly.
just make a little bit of progress, and it's not about taking massive steps. It's about just being consistent.
I agree, Andrew. And so, as we are approaching the end of our show, is can you share with our guests watching us from around the world as to how to contact you, how to find your books, and watch and read as to what you have read?
Thank you for that. Well, I have a newsletter that is very brief that I send out every 2 weeks, and it has a cartoon because all of my books are full of cartoons, as are my newsletters. So my website where you can sign up for my newsletter is andrewmatthews.com. So that's all one word, andrewmatthews.com. All of my books are on Amazon. So you will find Bouncing Back, Being Happy, Follow Your Heart in ebook and in hard copy. And if you like your books narrated with an Australian accent, then you will find Bouncing Back and Follow Your Heart there that I've just put on Audible. And, and I have lots of videos on YouTube and on Instagram. So usually quite short, and I'll just take one little subject, maybe it's about relationship, or maybe about enjoying work, and just look for one little gem that I think will be helpful to you.
Excellent, Andrew. And then for all those people and all the friends watching us from around the world, also for me, and from my perspective, for those people that like our shows and interviewing people from around the world about topics that are important to all of us, subscribe to my podcast and to Andrew's if he is podcasting, and at the same time share it with others, like it, make comments, and then also check on my books, Against All Odds. Is available on all the major media. I do also audios of it with a slight Dutch accent, likely. And I always think the other guys have accents, not me, as you likely do. And then the other one that is against, ADHD Unlocked, finding your passion, living the dream, so important. And then the other one, Living Young, Dying Old, all available on audio and on ebooks and all the other major media. And again, check out andrewmatthews.com and all his books, newsletters. And Andrew, it was a pleasure and a privilege to have you on my podcast. Let's make sure we stay in touch.
Let's do that, John. My absolute pleasure. Thank you.